everyone. It's Marilyn here with Take Two. So today we have two very special guests. We have Pastor David from the First Presbyterian Church in Napa. And like I said, it's a little gingerbread church that's downtown. And it's a beautiful church, actually. And so Pastor David is here to talk with us. And our other friend, Aimee, is A-I-M-E-E, and I had a hard time for several weeks trying to learn how to say her name, but it's Aimee. And Aimee and I worked together actually when I worked at Blue Oak, and she was the drama teacher, and she's fantastic. So we like to sing, Broadway songs to each other. Yeah. We can burst into song.
Qualified to come and talk about Islam.
That's right. Very qualified to talk about that. And I have to say, when I first met Aimee, I'm like, she wears that thing on her head. What's going on there? So, I had those questions, but she would always answer the questions for me. And one time I walked into my classroom, and Aimee was on the ground, and I thought she'd lost an earring or maybe a contact lens or something. And one of my students said, "She's praying." I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I was like, "Did you lose something? Did you lose something?" But no. Aimee was actually in my room praying, and we learned. Today I learned. So this is Aimee and Pastor David, so let's give them a River School welcome, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to see you. My name is David Stoker. I'm the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church downtown. How many of you know where the Uptown Theater is? Yeah, but we're that church right across the street. And you may have noticed our church last year during December, we had a display where we had the word love in 40 different languages shot up there with a laser. It was pretty amazing for about 10 days. It was just a way of saying love. It's what it's all about. But it is so good to be with you today. And we're a little bit nervous, to be honest. So, we'll do okay. This is the third time that I've been with you guys, and I love it. And her husband, Saeed, couldn't be here today, but we're sorry about that. But anyway, it'll be good for us. But anyway, I just want to take about 15 minutes and share with you a little bit about the Christian faith. I want to ask you, who here knows what an elevator talk is?
Oh.
Okay.
Just hit me.
None of y'all know that. Okay.
I might be wrong. But my guess is that it's the awkward conversation you have in an elevator, and you can't wait till you get out, and then the conversation can stop.
It could be that, certainly.
Okay.
But this is the point. People would often ask me, why are you a minister? Why have you done what you've done with your life? And I would stumble through, try to take about 2 minutes and tell them all this long story. And one day it hit me, no, I need to have an elevator talk. And an elevator talk is about 45 seconds that you have to tell your story. About the time it takes you to go from the first floor to the third floor, and then it's over. And that's it. So I kept thinking, I've got to have an elevator talk. And how can I sum up in 45 seconds, why I've done what I have in my life? And I've thought about it, and the bottom line for me is my elevator talk is, my purpose in life is to help people along their spiritual journey. Really simple. Very non-judgmental. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, I accept that, and I just want to help you go the next step. And it's not judging whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist. It's simply the point to help you along the journey. And that's what we're about today. You can see two different faith traditions, but we're about helping each other along the journey. So that's kind of the bottom line. But because I have a few more minutes today, I really do want to make a few points. So I actually wrote them down. And I usually speak without notes, but these were pretty important to me, so I really spent some time and wanted to share with you a little bit more than the elevator talk. The first thing I want to let people know is there is a God. And everybody doesn't believe that. Can you prove that there's a God? No, there's no way you can prove that there's a God. Can you prove that there's not a God? There's no way you can prove that there's not a God. And that's pretty important. But for me, there's one theory called the grand design. And that is that there's something behind the design of the world. And of course, I believe it's God. And they often use the example of a watch. If you walked out in the desert and you found a watch laying there, how did it get there? The carbon just didn't come together. All the different pieces just come together. There was some design behind that. And that's, for me, huge. When we look at the sunset, Pacific Ocean, the Grand Canyon, there was something behind that put that all together. And of course, I think that is God. So that's one of the proofs that people sort of use to try to suggest that there is a God. Everything didn't happen by accident. You look at a little baby, I could just go on and on about that. And I really believe that there's a need for people to be in contact with God. He created us, and that we need to have some type of contact with God. 6 years ago, we moved from Honolulu, Hawaii to Napa. And I was a pastor there for 8 years in Hawaii. When we arrived there, we were a minority. You know, we're Caucasian, and the majority of the island is Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Tongan, Samoan, and it was really interesting to be in a minority. My daughter went to a school, and she had blonde hair, and there were only 2 people in the whole school that had blonde hair. Everybody else had black hair. And it was a wonderful cultural experience for us. We had a home that had a swimming pool. My kids, I have 3 kids, and we started having these parties. And the first time we had a party, we had hamburger. We came from the South, from Charlotte, North Carolina, and we had hot dogs, hamburgers, potato salad. And someone told me that Asians like to have rice. So we had a little bit of rice. That's all the kids ate was rice. They could care less about the hamburgers and the potato salad. So we went out and bought a big rice cooker, and then from then on, every time we had a party, we had rice. And someone told me that Asian people have like 2 stomachs. One which is food that we normally eat, but there's also what they call a rice stomach. And until an Asian person has had rice, they are not satisfied. And if you go to McDonald's in Honolulu today, there is rice on the menu. There's rice everywhere. And the whole point I want to make is there really is inside each of us an emptiness, a void that has to be filled. And we try to fill it with all kinds of things. And I think we're supposed to fill it with God. God created us, and there's an emptiness inside of us. But the world today says, no, let's fill that up with money, with things that money can buy. Let's fill that up with drugs. Let's fill that up with sexuality, all these different things. So I think there's a big movement in the world today of trying to fill this emptiness everybody feels with other substances. And I believe that just like an Asian friend of mine has to have rice, I think we have to have that void, the emptiness inside, filled with God. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay, so you're kind of seeing where I'm going with us. So what happened to me is when I was your age, I was in a church youth group, and one night we went to see a Billy Graham evangelistic film, and it was at Christmas time, and the story was about this cool pastor. He drove a motorcycle, he had a collar on, just a really neat guy, and this couple came to his church, and they became Christians, and they decided, to follow Jesus, who we believe is the Messiah. And then tragically, the woman got sick, and it was a really dramatic scene in the movie, and she had a stroke, and she grabbed the Christmas tree, and the tree fell on the floor, and she ended up dying in the movie. So it was very Hollywoodish. But the minister came up to the father, her husband, and said, now that your wife was a Christian, she was ready to die, meaning she could go to heaven and all of that. And he looked at that minister with just anger in his eyes. And he said, no, now that my wife was a Christian, she was ready to live. And then he talked about the abundant life and how there's more specialty to life after you come to know God in a personal way. So that's what happened to me. I said, hey, I used to go to church, but now I really want to get into, someone mentioned a while ago, praying every day and having a real relationship with God. So that's kind of my story, and it never wore off. So for like 50 years now, I've been doing that. It's really about having that. One of you mentioned the 10 Commandments a few minutes ago, and we as Christians do follow the 10 Commandments, but so do our Jewish friends. So that's not a unique Christian thing. But the deal was that Jesus came along, and Jesus was Jewish as he could be, but he said, hey, it's not about following rules. In fact, he got kind of mad at the Pharisees, the religious leaders. He said it's not about being kosher, keeping a kosher family. It's not about not walking so many steps on the Sabbath day. It's all about the way you treat other people. And Jesus ended up hanging around with prostitutes, with drunkards, with people that the religious people didn't like at all. So for him, it was not about a bunch of rules. And it came down to a word that we call grace, G-R-A-C-E. And it's simply that God loves you. God created you. He loves you. He's never going to stop loving you. There's nothing that you and I can do to make God stop loving us. And that's a huge message. And then Jesus told a story about the prodigal son. And there was this father who had 2 sons. One of them was very proper. He kept all the rules and all of that. And the other son was wild. And he went up to his dad and said, hey, Dad, I want my inheritance right now. And it broke the father's heart, but he went ahead and gave him all the money. Then he went off to Party City and drank and hung around with prostitutes, did all this stupid stuff, and had all these wonderful friends. Oh, all these friends, they weren't wonderful. And then the money ran out. He couldn't buy the booze anymore, the drugs and stuff, and his friends dropped him, and he ended up working in a pig farm, feeding pigs. And for a Jewish person, they're not into swine at all. It's very much against their religion. And he said, hey, my father's servants back home eat better than I do. I'm eating this pig food. And he went back, and his father saw him coming from a distance, ran up and threw his arms around him. It's the only place in the Bible that we see God's in a hurry. God never runs. We read the Bible. There's never a time that God is in a hurry. This is the only time. And when he runs to welcome back his son. And he said, though my son was once lost, now he's found. Killed the fatted calf. Let's have a big party. Took the ring off his finger, gave him shoes, and restored him back to being a family. And that's what grace is all about. That you and I don't have to earn God's love. He loves us because he loves us. And your mother or your father loves you just because they love you. They're your child. You don't have to earn their love. And that was the big message that Jesus had, was that it's not about keeping a bunch of rules for the Jewish people, but it's about loving other people, serving the poor, all those types of things. So, two more quick things. I have a friend of mine, his name is Bill, and he was on a boat in Catalina one day, and he went to a party, did a lot of drinking, had a good time at the party, and people knew that he was a minister, but nobody said anything. And then as he was getting off his boat onto the little dinghy to sail back to his boat in the harbor, someone asked him, hey, Pastor Bill, what is Christianity all about? And he had just about 45 seconds to do it again. His elevator talk, and he said the difference is in do and done. And he said, do is what a lot of faith traditions try to do. You have to do this and this and this and this to have God love you. You have to earn God's love. And he says Christianity is about done. It's been done for us when Jesus died on the cross. And that's it. That you and I don't have to earn God's love. He died on the cross. That forgives us of our sins. We're in a good relationship with God. And I've always remembered when Bill said that story, that the difference in do, the things you and I try to do to earn God's love, and the things that's been done for us. So I relax. I'm forgiven. I don't have to worry about those types of things. So that's pretty huge thing for me. I want to share just a few things that I struggle with as a Christian. It's not all easy. One of the big issues for me is the whole problem of evil in this world. Why do bad things happen to good people? I have wept a lot this last month over Elena Hauser. She's a lady from Napa, graduated from Vintage High School, and then was murdered in a bar in Thousand Oaks last month. And all three of my children have been in that bar. They have Western night on Wednesday night to do the line dancing. I was afraid when I saw the news it might be one of them. My son goes to Pepperdine, where Elena was, and it just tore my heart that here's an 18-year-old girl, played the violin, a superb person, and she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And my son actually this past weekend, like 3 days ago, went up to the top of the hill and they put a big cross on the top of Pepperdine, and her parents were there. And by the way, my son's been in their home, knows the father, and they're in the same fraternity, so a lot of close connections to Elena. But I told my son yesterday, I said, we're going to be partying on Christmas Eve, having a good time, but they're going to be weeping at Elena's house because she's not there. So I struggle with that whole issue of why wasn't Elena's angel watching out for her? Why did that happen to her? How would I handle it if that happened to me and that had been one of my three children? Because they were in that bar before and those types of things. So that's just one of the issues. And there's not an answer for it in Christianity. There's not an answer for it in Judaism. And I don't believe there's maybe one in your faith tradition as well. But anyway, that's a struggle for me. Another struggle I have is why are there so many world religions? I this past summer spent 2 weeks in Thailand and in Cambodia, just on vacation. But for 2 weeks, I didn't see a single Christian. I didn't see a single American. And that was really interesting. It took me totally out of my culture of an American and being a Christian. And there are just millions of people in Bangkok, who are not Christians. And I'm saying, God, what is this all about? it's just hard for me to believe, that so many Christians say, well, if they don't believe in Jesus, they're not going to heaven. It's just hard for me to handle that. So I struggle with that. So I talk to a lot of the Buddhists, and they have all these different ideas. Some of them believe in reincarnation. We talk to them. They believe that when we die, we're going to come back again. Others, Buddhists, said, no, we believe that you live on in the memory of your family. They remember you, and they set up a little family shrine. That's how you live on. And it's pointless. There's a lot of different ideas in Buddhism about that. And I kept saying, Lord, if Christ is the way, and it's all about grace, why didn't you reveal yourself thousands of years ago to the Chinese? And then 3 years ago, I was in Egypt, and we saw the pyramids and all that, and they worship cats, and you've seen all that. And I thought, well, what is that, Lord? Why did you wait so long to reveal yourself to Abraham? And Abraham's what you and I share together. Abraham is the father of our faith tradition, as well as Aimee's. So, Aimee's. So I'm just saying, God, I don't understand. I just don't get it, what it's about. But I'm not God, and kind of the bottom line, when people ask me that question is, do I think so-and-so's going to heaven? I always say, well, that's not in my job description. That's not in my job description. God is God. God is loving. God is just. God is merciful. And when a person dies, whatever's supposed to happen, it will happen, because God is such a loving God. So I don't try to answer that question. But those are some things I struggle with. There's so many millions or billions of people. They all don't think the way I think. And what happens to them when they leave this earth? And I don't know the answer to that. And I also struggle with the problem of evil. Okay, last point, and then I'm done. 10 days from today is Christmas. And that's what a big part of our faith tradition. And we believe in what's called Emmanuel, God with us. It's called the Incarnation. Carnos is flesh. Carnivore is a dinosaur that eats, or animal that eats flesh. And what we believe is that God put on human skin and walked on this earth. And I love the story about a family. It's Christmas Eve. I think they're like up at Lake Tahoe. It's time to go to church. It's about 11 p.m. We're going to go to the midnight mass. And the father didn't want to go. He says, I don't believe in all that stuff, and I'm not going to go. And the mother and the kids go to church. And then it starts snowing, and there's a big glass window, and you just keep hearing the thud, thud, thud as these birds keep hitting the window, wanting to get in where it's dry and there's a fire and everything. And the father goes out there and he tries to shoo them into the shed that's in the back that's dry, and he tries everything, lays some bird seed out. They just won't follow it. And then he says, oh my goodness, if I could only become a bird, then I could communicate with them, and I could show them, and they could follow me the way to the shed. And then the bells rang, and then suddenly it was midnight, and it was Christmas Day. And he got down on his knees in the snow and said, oh God, that's what the Incarnation is. That's what happens. That you put on human skin, you put on flesh, and you walked among us for 32 years so that we could really see what God was like. That he wasn't such a mystery, but he really was a human being. So that's what Christmas is for us. It's the Incarnation. It's Emmanuel. That God's not up in heaven, but for a while Jesus was here on earth, and that he taught us a bunch of rules and stuff. Okay, that's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, trying to give all you guys that stuff, but that's kind of what I'm about, what I think the Christian faith is about. Should I answer questions or move to Aimee?
Let's go to May. I know.
I think maybe
let's go to
Aimee, and then
we'll
you do questions.
After that
Sure.
would be great. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Hi everybody. So my name is Aimee, and I am Muslim, and I converted from Christianity to Islam. Let's see, we're in 2018. Officially 13 years? No, 14 years ago. 14 years ago. And I know a little bit about Islam in terms of practicing as a Muslim. In comparison to others, I don't know as much, so I'm going to speak on Islam as best I can and answer your questions as best I can. My husband, Saeed bin Yunus, he's also a convert, and he is an imam. And an imam is very similar to a pastor in the Christian tradition. He leads our services, which are on Fridays, and he actually teaches a lot about Islam. He actually usually comes to River, and he actually he actually spoke to a college class, and after the college class I said, well, how was it? How are the questions, and what was it like? He's like, I have to tell you, those students at River asked so much better. The questions asked were so much better and sharper and more knowledgeable and interesting. And anyway, he loves coming to your school, and he was really sad he couldn't be here today. So I'm going to do my best to speak, not for him, but for Islam in the best way that I can. So I don't know how much you've learned. Keith had said that you've been studying different traditions. And so if I repeat something that you've already heard, and like, oh, we've already been hearing this, I'm sorry. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview, okay? So the word Islam means peace through surrender. So I'm a Muslim, so I'm someone who's practicing how to attain peace or salam through surrendering to God's will and kind of taking my own will and my own agenda and putting it over here, right? And trying to keep my focus on God. How do we do that as Muslims? How does one attain that? Because it's easy to say, like, I want to feel peace inside. Sure. How do you do that? So in Islam, it all comes down to 5 pillars. Have you guys talked about the 5 pillars of Islam? Awesome. What are they? Anyone remember? Let's name one pillar. Putting you on the spot here.
Come on, peeps.
Name one pillar. What's one pillar of Islam? There's 5. What's one?
They're being shy. We just talked about this again yesterday.
Don't make Keith look bad, you guys. Come on. If you just talked about it, I'm going to give you a hint, okay? One of them has to deal with not eating. You don't eat from sun up to sun. But say it. Fasting. You fast. So you have to fast as a Muslim. We're going to talk about that and why we do that. Great. What's another one? Yes?
Prayer?
5 times prayer. Exactly. We pray 5 times a day. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Awesome. What's another one? This one's the beginning. So before you do anything else, you have to do this one. Begins with a sh sound. Sha, shahada. The testification that you are a Muslim. So the testification is La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. And when you become a Muslim, that's what you say. And the testification means there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Have you guys talked about Prophet Muhammad? Yeah? Okay, great. So that's another pillar. Good. What's another one? Has to do with giving up money. Yes?
Charity.
Charity. Wonderful. Zakat, right? That's the Arabic word for it. Zakat. Every Muslim has to give a certain amount, 2% of their wealth every year. It's required. You have to. It's a way of giving back, because our belief is that Allah, the word we use for God is Allah, and Allah just means the one. In Arabic-speaking countries, Christians, people who follow the Christian tradition, also use the word Allah. It's found in the Bible, in the translations of Bibles, and that's all that it means. So, our belief is that Allah has bestowed, material wealth in varying degrees to different people, right? So you have some Muslims who were, incredibly wealthy, and what if they kept it all to themselves? What's that going to do to you as a human being, do you think? I've got all the money. I'm just going to money. It's all to be mine, right? Yes. Greed. Exactly. It's gonna foster greed, right? So zakat is a way of keeping people who have abundance connected to others, with their brothers, their sisters. In Islam, we call other Muslims brothers and sisters. Keeping your brothers and sisters fed, clothed, housed, medicated, whatever people need. Okay, great. 5th. There's a 5th pillar. This is a big one. It involves a really big trip, and you do some things on the trip, and some interesting things happen potentially on the trip. Yes?
Is it like the pilgrimage?
It isn't like the pilgrimage. It is the pilgrimage. You're correct. It's the pilgrimage. There's not a simile. It actually is. So it's the pilgrimage. So the pilgrimage happens once a year, and Muslims from all over the world come to a city called Mecca. Wonderful. And in Mecca, they all gather there for a certain amount of time, and they do this ritual called the Hajj, right? Hajj literally translates to pilgrimage, right? And the people who go on the pilgrimage and finish it, complete it, are called, if you're a man, you're called a haji, and if you're a woman, you're called a hajjat, which means you actually completed the pilgrimage. Now, are all Muslims required to do that? Do you have to do that? It's a little kind of a trick question. No. Only if you can. You try to do it at least once in your life, but right now the packages out of the United States at least are like around $10,000 to $20,000. I mean, it's so expensive. I'm like, I'm just getting away from the original idea of the pilgrimage, but I don't know. No one asked me. But it's very expensive, all right?
Have you been on one?
Inshallah, I would love to. Inshallah means if Allah wills it. And inshallah, I have not. I have not been to Mecca. I would love to go to Mecca. Why Mecca? Why is Mecca so important to Muslims? What happened in Mecca? A long time ago. Like almost 2,000 years ago. What happened in Mecca? Why would Muslims go to Mecca every year for a pilgrimage? Yes?
Is it Muhammad's home?
Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's his home. Yes, wonderful. What happened in his home? What happened? Through Muhammad. What happened? Yeah?
God spoke to him?
God spoke to him. Did he speak to him directly like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Is that what happened? No, what happened?
He spoke
I know you. Well, how, your face.
Eliza.
Oh my God, Eliza, hi! How are you? Guys who grow up and you don't see it. I'm getting old. Okay, so, great. So, yes, did he speak to him like, you know, hey, what's up? What happened?
It was like, I think it was a dream.
Wasn't it a dream?
Like,
Close. He was. Wait, what? Go ahead.
what? It came to his thought, like his head. Like,
It came to him. What came to him, though? Actually, something came to him. What was it? It was a voice, but how did it come to him? And this actually happened in the Christian tradition as well. Who came to him? Someone very specific. It's a being filled with light. A light-filled being came to him. What would you think is a light-filled being? Yeah? An angel, yes. Good. Who was the angel? The angel who? It's a big one. Kind of important in the terms of angels. Yes? Gabriel! Yes, excellent. Angel Gabriel came to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And what happened before he saw the angel Gabriel, he heard a voice, and the voice said, Ikra. And Ikra means read. Now here's what was interesting to the Prophet Muhammad. What could Prophet Muhammad, ﷺ, and I say that, ﷺ means peace be upon him. Anytime we as Muslims say his name, we say, please bring a God, please bring your peace to him, because then that in turn brings peace to us, right? It's a way of showing how we honor him, right? We don't pray to him, but we honor him, and that's how we honor him, all right? So, what could he not do? He did a lot of things, but what could he not do? Yeah.
he couldn't read.
He couldn't read. He was illiterate. So the voice came to him, and he said, Ikra, and it said, read, and he said, and he was terrified, it was his booming voice, and he said, I cannot read. And it said, read, Ikra, and he said, I cannot read. And then it said, read in the name of your Lord. And at that moment, he felt this incredible, overwhelming sense of it was very intense, he sweat, he felt this pressure on his chest, and he saw this revelation. And it was the first revelation of what? It was the first time he had the revelation of, I'm going to give you a hint, it's the holy book of Islam. Yes, the Quran. It was the first time he ever had a revelation of the Quran. And it terrified him. He was terrified. And what do you do when you're terrified? He was in a cave by himself. So if you're terrified in a cave by yourself, what do you think you're going to do?
Faint.
What?
Faint.
Could, but he didn't. But yes, that's just a good choice. But what did he do? He ran. Oh man, he ran. Get out of there. And he ran, and when he came out of the cave, who did he see? I'm going to go back to that original. Who did he see? Who did he see? The being filled with light. Yes. He saw the angel Gabriel. But it wasn't like a sweet little angel who's like, hello. Anywhere he looked, Gabriel filled the sky. And it was overwhelming. He was getting a sense of God's majesty, right? The intensity. And he ran home to his wife Khadija, and he was shaking, and she covered him. Right? You know when someone's in a traumatic experience and they always on like a scene, like an accident or something, and everyone's wrapped in blankets? She wrapped him in a blanket. And he thought he was going crazy. So do you know what she did? She took him to her uncle, who was Christian. And she told him, he's nervous, this is what happened. And her uncle said, no, la, which is Arabic for no, la. This is a revelation. This is God. This is God speaking to him. And he was the first person to confirm. And that was the beginning of what? What was that the advent of? That moment began,
Does it start with an I?
it starts with an I,
Does it end with an M?
ends with an M,
Uh-huh.
and it's got a couple letters in between. Yes.
Islam.
It began Islam. Beautiful. Yes. That is what began the tradition of Islam. Over a period of 25 years, the entire Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. And he can't write, he can't read, so what would happen is he would recite. It was a recitation, and Quran just means a recitation. He would recite it, and the companions around him, which were called the Sahaba, people who started listening to the teachings, started writing it down. That was compiled, and that became the Quran that we have today, actually, still. Yes? So, that is why it is in Mecca. What is there in Mecca? And this is actually from the time of Abraham, who is the father of all the 3 monotheistic traditions. What is in Mecca that is so important to Muslims? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, loved to go there.
They saw it yesterday, but I'm not sure if they're going to pull up.
Remember,
the map.
it's got 4 sides and it looks like a cube. I'm thinking a lot of this, like, what? It's got black cloth on it now, but back then I don't know if it did. It wasn't there. It's called the Kaaba. And the Kaaba is at the center of, you guys, have you seen pictures of the pilgrimage? Of Muslims who are at the, I should have brought my book. So when you've got, it's the largest gathering of anywhere in the world. So if you've got 3 to 6 million people, they're all circumambulating, which is walking around counterclockwise around this cube. It's called the Kaaba. So why would they be walking around something like that? What's the significance of it, do you think? And this is actually from the time of Abraham. Abraham actually built the first Kaaba. And in the Islamic tradition, the belief is that it sits underneath the seat of the throne of God. In Islam, there's a belief that there's 7 heavens. There's the lowest heaven, which is kind of like the closest to where, like, the star-filled heaven that we can see. And then it goes up to the throne of God. The Kaaba is believed to be right underneath that throne, which is why Muslims come during the pilgrimage and they circumambulate around it. That's part of the pilgrimage. So, it actually was there during the Prophet Muhammad's time. Yes? All right. So, fasting. Why do Muslims fast? What's that? What do you think that's about? When do we fast? When's the time that you're required to fast? You have to fast. Do you remember what that's called? Begins with an R?
Is it Ramadan?
It's Ramadan. Yeah. Ramadan. Wonderful. So, Ramadan actually was something that happened even before Islam began. And it's a time of restriction. We're restricting ourselves. What is food when if you don't eat and you don't drink? What do? What do you go to? What's left?
Sleep.
The last sleep. Definitely, because you get tired, right? But what's the last thing that you have? Your breath, right? That's all you have, right? So, when we fast as Muslims in Ramadan, you fast from sunup to sundown during those hours, all right? And during the night you eat and you drink and you pray. But during that time you're fasting because what do you think it makes you think of? If you can't eat and you can't drink, what does it make you feel like? That you're what? Yeah.
That you're not, like you're poor.
You're poor. Yeah. There's people, you guys know what's happening in Yemen right now? There's millions of people. I think the last number I saw was at least 15 million people are starving to death. They don't have food. It's actually horrifying. It's a horrifying crisis that's happening on the planet right now. They don't have enough to eat. So you, as a Muslim, when you fast, it gives you a sense of what that feels like and what does that breed? What's underneath that feeling? What if I'm crying right now, what am I feeling for them? I'm feeling what? Sympathy, compassion. Builds compassion. Compassion is a big part of being Muslim. It's also a big part of being a Christian. It's a big part of being a member of the Jewish tradition. I'm sure many other traditions as well. It's giving you the sense of what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes and to feel for them, right? What else do you think fasting does? If you got nothing left, you're like, I got who do you turn to for help? God. Beautiful. You turn to God for help because you don't have anything else. There's so many times when I'm praying and I'm fasting, I'm like, I got nothing. And I'm just like, I literally just put my head down because I don't know what else to do. Because you can't turn to like, I think I'll have a latte and that'll make me feel better. You know, you can't do that, right? You can do that at night, not during the day. Good. 5 times prayer. We pray 5 times a day. Now here's what's funny about that. You pray, the prayer is actually how a Muslim person organizes their life. So what's most important to you as a Muslim is the prayer and meeting the prayer. So this morning when I woke up and I prayed before the sun finished rising. You have to pray before the sun finishes rising. That's called Fajr. And then you do a midday prayer, which is called Dhuhr prayer, when the sun is at the highest. You do a late afternoon prayer called Asr. And then you do a sunset prayer, which is called Maghrib, right? And you do another prayer late at night called Isha, right? So you pray 5 times a day. Which direction do you think? Because have you ever seen like a big group of Muslims praying, or even one Muslim praying? They seem to be facing a specific direction, yeah? Which direction are they facing? Any guesses? Huh? This is a big one. Yeah?
Toward the sun?
Toward the sun. Great guess. No, it's a great guess. Not toward the sun. Yes?
Towards Mecca?
Toward Mecca. Why would they face toward Mecca?
It's the Holy Land.
Because it's the Holy Land. Why is it the Holy Land?
That's where Islam started.
It's where it started. Beautiful. What specifically is in that Holy Land of Mecca? The Kaaba. Yeah. So we face the Kaaba. We face the Kaaba. Why would we face the Kaaba? I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Why would we face the Kaaba? I just said it a second ago, not to put pressure on you. Why would we face the Kaaba specifically? Because it's what? Heaven here.
Oh, yes, that's the lowest point of heaven.
It's under the seat of the throne of God. So it's for Muslims, it's like facing God. You're facing God, yeah? And when you do the prayer, it's a physical actualization of surrender. Have you guys ever seen like a movie where someone's like, you know, we surrender, we surrender. Or if they're like bowing down to like a king or something, they do this, yeah? Oh, king. Have you ever seen that, right? And I can hold everything out. So that's what Muslims do, but we do it toward God, right? So we actually prostrate. We go down. Have you guys seen pictures of that, of people actually like in the middle of the prostration down? Yeah. So we actually prostrate toward God as a way of saying we submit to you, right? And it's actually, guys, I have to tell you, it's like kind of like going to a little spiritual spa every day, because everything kind of stops and you put your whole crazy life that you lead, wonderful, but can be crazy, and you sort of put it away for a moment, and it helps you reconnect with God, yeah? And reconnect with your own spirit. And from that, what do you think you feel after the prayer? You feel what? It's an intellectual idea. What's the name of the religion? Islam. And Islam means what? To find surrender. To find what through surrender? Peace. So after the prayer, what do you think you feel? Peace. Right. So it's a way of physically living it. It's having a physical experience of that, and a physical experience of what it feels like to connect with the divine, with your Lord. Yeah? All of the Quran, except for one chapter, it's all divided into chapters. Each chapter starts with the word Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, and which means in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And that is what really drives and is underneath all of Islam, all of the Quran, and is also connected to other traditions in terms of grace, in terms of compassion, right? That no matter what happens, God is loving. He is kind, he is compassionate, right? Even in the struggles, even in the tough times, right? That's how you go back and you find that peace.
On that note, lovely note, just because I want them to be able to ask questions, because you know we have the bell schedule thing here, and now we've got 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
So we would love, as much as I love both of you,
No.
but let's ask some questions to May and Pastor David. Anything you want to ask is okay. What do you want to know about Islam? What do you want to know about Christianity, or them, or their faith, or anything? All right, go for it.
I want to say I love the fact you've got CYO, is that Catholic Youth Organization? I love it, man. You know so much about Islam and Catholic. That's awesome. Okay.
What's your question, sweetie?
Why did you choose to convert to Islam from Christianity?
So
You want to repeat for the flip cam?
Sure. So the question was, why did you choose to convert to Islam from Christianity?
Christianity.
Great question.
So I grew up Catholic. Interesting, you're wearing the Catholic sweatshirt. I grew up Catholic, and I loved it. I loved going to church. I went to a Catholic school. I loved the feeling I get when I would sing the hymns, and I loved the story of Jesus, peace be upon him. I felt it was my culture. You know, it was what I was connected to. When I became an adult, I started. I stopped going to church. I became very disillusioned with some things about specific things which I won't go into for me, and I stopped. And in stopping, I stopped turning to God, and I started trying to turn to things in the world, a career, being an actor. I was an actor in New York City, you know, was having a really thriving career. I was a comic actress in New York, and had my commercial agent, and had my agent, and was auditioning, and doing plays, and doing film, and doing television, and I was never more miserable. I felt like everything inside of me was shriveling and dying, while everything was thriving externally. And in that time, someone in my family, I grew up in Austin, Texas, someone in my family met a man named Sidi Mohammed Al-Jamal Al-Rafai Ashaduli, and he is a sheikh, which means he's somebody who knows the religion very well, and he teaches. And he was a judge in Jerusalem, which is another holy city, actually a holy city for all three monotheistic traditions, a very holy city. And he lived there. And he would started coming to the United States to do teachings, and my family had met him, and I met him. And through meeting him, I saw that piece that I was talking about. He had it. I sat in front of him to ask him questions one time, and it was like sitting in front of a person who literally has just bright light flooding out of them. And I immediately started weeping, and I remember thinking, I want what he has. So I started, and he is somebody who is a Sufi, which is somebody who studies the mystical components of Islam, and so I started studying Sufism through him. And I started learning about Islam, and I loved it. I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with how it made me feel. And so I converted, and I converted with him. My whole family converted. My parents, my sisters, and that's why I also met my husband, Saeed, and he had converted about 10 years before. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. Questions?
For those of you who are, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
What's with like the whole like head thing? Like
I was wondering if I was gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wear a scarf on my head. So here's the deal with that. In a lot of traditions, women wear scarves on their heads. Actually, it's not just Muslim. There's beautiful traditions of women in Christianity. Nun orders often have their heads covered. If you see like. I see this in a lot of cultures in Mexico, women going off to Easter Mass, and they'll be wearing those beautiful, they'll be wearing veils or like lace veils, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you see statues of Mary, the mother of Jesus, what is she wearing? She's wearing a headscarf. Yeah. In the Jewish tradition, a lot of women cover their hair as well. For a woman, in Islam specifically, at the time of the advent of Islam, women covered their heads. Why? Why would they cover their heads in places like Jerusalem, in places like Saudi Arabia? Why? Yeah.
Was it to protect them from evil? I'm just gonna guess.
You're close with protection. It's more practical. Why would women cover their head in a desert country? In a desert where it's hot and sunny. Yes. Protect their heads from the sun. Protect themselves because it's hot. And actually, a scarf is cooling. It cools you down. Now, that's an external reason. In the Quran, it actually calls for women to cover. At that time, the women were already covering, wearing scarves. But what they were not doing is they were covering their chests. And a lot of times they would wear dresses that were open, where you could see a woman's cleavage, and sometimes even more than that. And so there's actually a passage in the Quran that says for women to cover their pocket. Your pocket, and to cover that, right? Now, there is actually an internal meaning of it as well, because you're covering over, you're veiling parts of yourself that are supposed to be private, right? For you, not for anybody else. For your husband, for family, right? So it's become very traditional in the Islamic religion for a lot of Muslim women to cover their hair. I don't know if you guys recently saw, but we had midterm elections, and there was a woman who just became a representative, a new representative. She's going to be in the freshman class for the United States House of Representatives. Do you know who she is? She covers her hair. Her name is Ilhan Omar. She's from Somalia. She's from Somalia originally. She's American now, and she's from Minnesota, I think.
It's one of the M's.
One of the M's. And anyway, you can't wear a head covering in the House of Representatives, and she's getting ready to, it's a ban, and she's getting ready to turn that over because she covers. There's another Muslim woman who was just elected out of, I believe, I don't think she's governor, I think it actually also House of Representatives, from Detroit. She's Palestinian American. She does not cover. So I believe that covering is something that comes, it's a big decision, because once you cover your hair, you don't take it off. In terms of being in the outside world, when I go home, I take it off. I don't sleep with it on. I've had people ask me, do you shower with it on? No, that would be counterintuitive. You do take it off, but when you're in the outside world, you keep it on, right? So it's a big decision. It was a big decision when I decided to do it, and it took a while for me to kind of make that decision. But that's something that I feel is a very personal decision for women in our faith. Yeah.
Can I ask a question for both of you about, there's a lot of things that I would say in the world come from a place of hate, or you talked about evil, and people claim that they're Christians, people claim that they're Muslim, and they do some really awful things in the name of those. Can you just kind of speak to that? How do you reconcile, or how do you, Pastor David, how do you kind of reconcile that when people are doing things? What's your, I guess, feeling?
Well, it's just hard because they're not following the teachings of the Bible and the teachings of Jesus. And we say that you don't judge, but there are certain times Jesus got very angry. And so it's not always all about being meek. When there's injustice, you really are supposed to speak up. But no, there are people who say they're Christians, and boy, the things that they do are so far off base from what Jesus would do. Years ago, people would wear a little bracelet and say, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And I still think that's a great idea. In this situation, what would you do? So yeah, they sure don't represent the faith that I know, which is the faith of peace.
Yep, same with Islam. So there's a teacher who I studied with a long time ago. She used to say, God is God and man is man, and don't confuse the two. Man will do horrible things to man. Why? We don't know. We wish they didn't. But this is why we have good people who correct that, who then do bring goodness back into the world. We can always turn to God, though. That's never going to change.
On that note.
So that was our bell. Thank you guys for not leaping from your seats when the bell rang and gave respect to our speakers. And thank you both very much. That was incredible. So thank you. Can we give them some appreciation?